oldest niece does, and they're part of that. So that's kind of where we started our adoption journey. And I think it was something I wanted to do, and my husband wasn't as sure as I was. But then seeing it in our family, it really kind of helped bring that process along. Like, yeah, this is something that I'm really passionate about. And so our son Levi, we kind of had starry eyes coming into it too. Like, oh, it's happened super fast for my sister. It'll happen fast for us. And that wasn't our story at all. That was not God's plan for us. So Levi, we waited 2 years for Levi, and we went through 4 fall-throughs. So that was 4 different times that we had met a birth mom or had a call from the agency, like, pack your bags. We think it's going to be your turn. And then it was, a couple hours, like, never mind. She picked someone else, or she decided to parent the child, or those things. So our journey to Levi was a long and hard one, but it was worth every minute of it. So he was born in February, and we got to meet his birth mom a couple times before he was born, and then we ended up getting to take him home from the hospital. So that's kind of our story and where we started with adoption. So Joe Mose, you want to share a little bit about foster care? And yeah.
Our story is a little bit different. We came in just wanting to just foster, and then we had a placement in our home for about 1.5 years, and our little guy, he was 9 when he was placed in our home, and we absolutely fell in love with him, and the plan was to adopt him. Actually, the plan was to finalize adoption in November, and then that fell through after 1.5 years. So we're still dealing with losing him. He's in another foster placement right now. But yeah, we're dealing with that right now.
Yeah. As far as like getting involved, we're both in the social work field. We've worked with foster kiddos in several of our jobs, different ages, different populations, like residential placements, and we work together with like older foster youth who were transitioning out on their own, who were aging out of the system, so getting them set up in their own homes and teaching them, how to grocery shop and do those sorts of things. We worked in group homes and things like that, and we really just felt called to get more involved, not just a 8 to 5 kind of thing, get to leave it at the end of the day, and kind of move on, but really get more involved, and that's why we pursued like foster care, like getting licensed and things like that to bring kiddos into our house. So that's, I guess, where our story started. Yeah.
So we adopted from Haiti, and my husband's amazing. He just kind of goes along with what I want to do. So he probably could have stopped with 2, but he was always open to what kind. And I'm the one who works. He's the one who stays home. So he's pretty special. But yeah, so I was, and I was thinking this, Tony. I think I went to Haiti, and we were both in high school at the same time. I think we were on the same trip. I think maybe.
They were.
Yeah. So it's just funny. But yeah, so then you're in high school, and you're like, I'm going to adopt these kids. And I just kind of stuck with it, saying that I wanted to. And then it does look this magical, oh, you're going to save the world and be so amazing. But it's really, really hard. But then, like, looking back on it, we're 3 years into it, and there's so many, like, fruits and blessings that come from it. It's just, I think, having your eyes wide open that it will be hard. Mm-hmm. So we had our maybe 4-year-old, and then the 2-year-old, or 1-year-old, and then that's when we started it. It took us maybe 2.5 years to bring them home. That was 3 trips that we had to take, and that was very torturous. For me, I was working, so I could get out, but for my husband, we have, reverse roles, but him leaving the kids there. We'd see him, love them. They're screaming into the night as they're taken away from us. And so him being home, and that's all I had to think about, that was really hard for him. I was busy working, but so there's just some pain that goes along with that. And he hates to travel. I've taken this poor guy to Africa and then to Haiti. He had to go without me, and this poor guy, he's just so amazing. But And then the Haitian wants to have him in his wedding, and he can't say no. Poor
Because he's
husband.
so friendly.
Yes, exactly. So that was just long and very, very hard. And then the first year when we were bringing him back, she was older, she was 5, and she had to fight for herself, so much so she was still fighting for herself. And I mean, the biting and just different things like that she would do when we would take her into timeout. It's just all this instinctive rebellion that she would have against us that was so hard. And I just remember holding her, being like, I cannot love this girl. And then she's on the floor, you know, screaming and spitting and all this stuff. And you're just like, this is my life for the next 10, you know, you're just doing this at 18. And you're just like, I think I talked to the Wamsleys. I said, if they're spiting you, it doesn't mean they're going to do it at 18. Just to let you, I'm like, no one told me they were going to bite me. But she was 5 and she had to take care of herself. So she fought and she stole and she lied, and we're still working with lying. But there's just all those instincts that they have. But that girl, I tell you, I took 3 weeks off of work, and it was like 3 weeks of boot camp. And it sounds rough, but to like get him in a field of, get him in that discipline. So it took us like 45 minutes to take her to school. She wouldn't put her seatbelt on. So it was just back in timeout, holding you, biting, you know, back and forth. Everything took super, super long, but eventually she was the one who like loved the rules the most, because I think she felt so safe. It's like after she rebelled against that for so long, all of a sudden she's like, you're going to go to timeout. You know, she'd tell her siblings. One of the best things, because I would contrast the two. My London would go to timeout, boom, boom, boom. She'd sit there like no doubt that she was loved. Whereas my Dulcie, when we first brought her home, she would go there and spit. You know, she just felt so rejected, that timeout was rejection. And it wasn't. I was holding her. They always say that in adoption, you have time in with your adopted kids so they don't feel rejected. I'm holding her. But it was just this, like, I must be rejected. I must be all this sort of stuff. And the best day was when I sent Dulcie to timeout. This is 2 years in, and she... Like, there's no question in her mind that she was loved. Mom's just annoying right now. You know what I mean? There was no rejection. She was confident. And so when you see those little glimpses along the way, that, you know, boot camp meant something. So that was kind of our journey. We're 3 years into it, and it's a lot better. They feel like the whole love thing. At first, it is different. It feels different. You don't even want to cuddle them. Or it just feels strange. But then it's 3 years into it now. It feels a lot different, like equal. So.
It was about 15 or 16 years ago. God really started moving, actually, in Megan's life, and she really started to have a yearning and a passion to understand what this call was on our lives. So she approached me, and I wasn't quite sure about it at first. It was one of those things where we took it pretty slowly, and that was a whole process of just gaining information and learning as much as we could. It took a couple, probably 2 years of conversation and dialogue, going back and forth and praying about it, as far as whether we would be able to officially commit and start that process. So we did start the process after really feeling that God was leading us in that direction. For us, we hadn't had any biological children at that point, so we wanted to be intentional about planning our family that way, and we chose adoption first, so that when we eventually had biological children, they would feel more of a part of our family. And so that was the way it ended up working for us. And that's how, I guess, God had it planned for us. But then as we started the process, we were chosen by a birth mother, and then eventually went through the whole process with her, and
We met her and everything.
Yep.
And she was only 15, so you definitely think this is in the bag. Like, she surely is not going to keep this baby. It's not the best choice in our minds, you know.
And so she ended up keeping the baby. It was a baby girl, and for us, that was, it kind of hard to wrap your minds around it, but it was almost like losing your own child. It really rocked our world for quite a while.
Yeah, I'll say too that I feel really strongly about being really walked through the process of adoption and really counseled on it, and we weren't before that at all. Like we went in blindly. We fell in love with her. We fell in love with a baby girl that was ours, no matter what. That's what we were thinking, you know, and we weren't taken through proper steps with the agency that we chose first. And you could tell, we felt that. I mean, it was literally like, you're having a baby, she's born, and a phone call coming to you saying, well, she kept her. You're like, what? I mean, and that was it. All ties were broken then. And it was unbelievable. You know, I had quit my job, and so I'm staying at home thinking I'm having a baby, and I'm just sitting around all day, and we were never properly walked through that. And then the next agency that we picked, and it was funny because we weren't for sure of how this was going to work, but our social worker actually worked for the birth parents and the adoptive couple. And I'm thinking, no, you have to advocate for us, you know, and then you realize, no, you advocate for this child. Like, this is all that matters, is this child. And if it's a good agency, they're going to do that. And they did, for sure. And we did, you know, in Florida, it was domestic in Fort Lauderdale. And it was really beautiful to see our birth mother, our oldest is who we met the most and spent the most time with her. Her being counseled through her whole pregnancy and whole journey, and her feeling like this was her choice, it really is, and her understanding and grieving it the whole way and being walked alongside, and us doing it with her, you know, and understanding that she matters the most too, you know, like this is her decision, and we want her to realize that we love her as much as we love this baby. And so it was really beautiful to see that, and there was such a difference with agencies, and there was such a difference with the way that she was counseled through it, and the way that she left the hospital, you know, and the way that even our second then was a little bit younger, and it was the same agency, but she was a little bit younger, and she did not go through the proper steps. She kept her pregnancy a secret, and sadly delivered alone and had a C-section by herself, was transferred to another floor of the hospital, and he just stayed in the nursery, and then we were called. And all of our paperwork had actually expired because it only lasts for so long, and we had a 11-month-old, and you know, our paperwork was for the baby girl that we lost, and it had worked for our oldest, but then it had expired for the second. So my heart was brewing, and he didn't know it yet. My heart was brewing for another baby, even though we only had an 11-month-old, and I had never told him. And then, I know, I'm insane, but I felt it. I just knew that God had a baby for us. And I called our agency, and she said, there's a baby that the birth mom left. And I remember telling him and him being like, okay. And our families were like, you're doing what? You're only 25 years old and you already have a baby, and what are you doing going to Florida and having another one? But it worked, and we got our paperwork done as fast as we could, and he went to foster care for 2 days, or for 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and the foster parents were great. They took pictures and sent it to us, but we spoke on the phone to his birth mom, but that was it. And even that phone call, I mean, she wanted what was best for him. She wasn't doing it because she didn't care. She just was 18 and scared, and she didn't have anybody to walk alongside her and help her. And so our kids' stories are different, but yet unique. And being able to spend time with our birth mom, and even someday, I know that we both feel like our story is not over with yet. We know that they're going to be part of our lives again, and just whenever it's best for our kids, all of them.
Thanks for sharing, guys. We really appreciate you coming in and sharing your stories. I know with adoption, it does get a little tricky too with sharing stories, because they're not our stories, they're our kids' stories. So we really appreciate you sharing your children's stories and preserving their dignity and being vulnerable too. We really appreciate that. So this next part is just going to be just kind of some Q&A. So if you want to write down questions on that note card that I gave you, that's fine. If you want to just raise your hand and shout out questions, we'll do that too. There's a couple questions that we get asked a lot, and I think a lot of people, certain questions come up over and over again. So the first one that I get asked, and it's in kind of a multitude of ways, and I'll just have different people on the panel ask, and you guys can be thinking about your own questions, is especially for people who have a biological child already, or have biological children and adopted children, do you love your children the same? And that's asked kind of in a multitude of ways. How can you love somebody else's baby? And do you love them the same? And so does anybody want to take a crack at how you would answer that question?
I was going to say, for us, our experience, we've had the one placement. I would say most definitely we love him the same as we love our children. Like Francis had said, we're still working through and still processing through losing him, and like it was mentioned down there, it's like losing one of your own children. In the beginning, it does feel a little different. It feels a little different, but then as you go about, nurturing that child and bringing them into your family, yes, your love develops just the same as it does for your biological children, or at least in our case, it definitely does.
I think the same for us, and at first it's just knowing it's a choice. It's kind of in marriage. Your feelings are going to come up and down, but you're like, I choose to love this child like a biological, and like Jesus loves me. And that was one of the greatest things that showed me about God's love, is when she's biting me, and I'm like, I've done this to you, God. And so, and I'm like, I'm going to choose to love you. So it's kind of like marriage, you choose it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then the feelings come as you make a choice, and the feelings come because you nurture it.
Yeah.
I think, for when we were in the hospital and Elijah was just born, it was like, the thoughts are like, what am I doing? Can we really do this? Is this where God is wanting us to be? And then they hand you the child and ask you to make that commitment. And as you make that commitment and take that baby, for us it was just like, this is God. He is our child, God's child, and the love was just immediate.
It's been really beautiful too. We both come from really huge families. To see all of our siblings and cousins embrace just love and pour over our children. And I know it's been a trickle effect with our whole families and changed things. We also have, both of our kids are different races. And so that has been really beautiful to see that develop our family and change the way our entire lives work. It's been really great. But for us, it was, just like he said, we chose to adopt. I had felt it really strongly that wanting these, our boys to get pregnant with us and to go through that process. It was really special. And it was something that God really placed on our heart, for sure, because I was an aunt in 3rd grade. So getting pregnant was like the highlight for me. I couldn't wait to be a mom. All I knew was kids. And so it was really something that God really, really placed strongly in our hearts.
Yeah, I've been asked that question a lot. I have a community of people that I'm connected to that have children about the same age as my oldest. And I think I would say yes, absolutely, I love my children, both of them. And I don't think I see, when I look at them, I don't say, oh, you're my biological child and you're my adopted child. There are some things I do different as a parent. But I also kind of explain that, that attachment develops. So yes, it's a choice, and when I first told Levi, it was immediate, and there were tears, and it was this long process, but it comes in waves too. I definitely had moments after he was born where I was like, am I really his mom? Is he attached to me? Is this really, and it wasn't like I'm going to give it back or anything, but I think it's, I carried my daughter for 9 months, and our attachment developed, and I think the same thing is true with an adopted child. Sometimes you need time for it for the feelings to come. You've made the choice, but sometimes, the feelings come in waves until
you
you
can't
really.
beat yourself up about it.
Yes.
Like the feel. I remember one time, the first year you're in a fog. Is all I can say. You are in a fog, and I just remember Dulcie was all concocted, pretending to be a fish, and all in our living room, just looking like, who is this strange person in my house? And just being almost like, kind of just like, ugh.
Yeah.
And just to know that's just kind of comes, and not beat yourself up. And I've had other adopted moms say it feels like I'm parenting a stranger, and to know to share those feelings, and it's okay, because your choice is to love them, and the attachment does come.
Yeah.
So,
And they are a stranger.
I don't know if you've
They are.
had. Did you have that with yours at all?
Um,
You're a real expert. You should be up here.
Yeah.
I want to learn from you.
there were seasons I was more challenged with my biological
Right,
kid
Yeah.
than my
right,
adopted.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So,
Yeah.
but attachment came, it came really well, easy for me.
Yeah.
It came easy for Greta, with the exception of her two oldest boys, just because I went to Ethiopia and got the boys and brought them home, and they had and like she had said, that our kids all come with wounds and such, so there were some wounds in their life that were reinforced that Greta wasn't there to pick them up, and we thought we were doing what was best by leaving Greta, home with Hasi and Yabi and Anya, but it reinforced some wounds in the boys. That took longer for Greta to attach to the boys.
Yeah. I think the other biggest question that I get asked is about finances. How did you afford adoption, and why is adoption so expensive? Are you millionaires because you've adopted? Those kinds of questions. So, anybody? And I know foster's a little different. So
It is, yeah. So, did you say we were going to adopt? Yes. So yeah, so we were looking into the adoption process through foster care and through the state. Like I said, our plan was to have finalized actually here this month. But actually adopting through the foster care system, you get a stipend, an allowance from the state, and then there are different attorneys in town that you can go through to do that. And knowing that you're adopting through the foster care system, they only charge what that stipend is from the state. So it's like there's a processing fee.
Processing fee, unless someone comes up, a family member, and decides to fight,
Contest
the adoption, then you might get some extra fees there, and that's out of your pocket. But most of the time, that doesn't happen, and there's the amount that you get from the state usually covers
Besides like
the
a
whole process.
$75 like processing fee. So it's far cheaper than like adoption, like not through the foster care system. But with those traumas and things, it comes at a different price, or like a price in a different way besides monetary. If that makes any sense.
It's like marriage. It's not just the wedding expense.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not the big event; it's the long term. Yeah. So, but yeah.
In foster care, you don't always get to pick either. If you were to adopt through the SNAP program, yeah, you can try to pick. But as a foster parent, you are called and you're told age and maybe a snippet of information, and then were you willing to take the child, take this placement?
Yes.
And you get a child. Our last placement was 2 years old and came along with probably onset autism. But we were not aware of that. We were not told that.
Yes.
And we were not at all prepared for how to take care of a child who only eats out of a bottle at age 2.
Yeah.
And for the 3 weeks that we had him before he went into relative placement, which is a week ago, 2 weeks ago. He went from eating in a bottle to just grunting and making noises because he had no speech, to learning how to eat out of a sippy cup and a straw, to feeding himself, which he did not know how to feed himself. He would just lick the food and throw it on the floor. But just advocating for the child and helping them along just a little bit.
Yeah,
And then foster to adopt, it takes time.
most definitely. Yeah. Yeah, as far as getting those placements, you don't get a lot of information. And sometimes case manager or the caseworkers change so frequently that they don't even have the information to give you. So it's not a choice of their own, it's just that they're also new and they have no clue, which is so sad. But yeah, that's true, at least in our experience with that placement that we had, the amount of information you had was not sufficient.
Yeah. What about you guys, Kenners?
So overseas adoption is pretty expensive. We've been blessed financially, so that wasn't a huge thing for us. But I wouldn't let the cost hold you back. I just know countless people who, once they step out, the need's met. So I don't know if that's kind of, yours was overseas too. And I think if people hear of your heart, people want to have other adoptive families. They have a garage sale, and the things that people will give them for their junk because they know what it's for.
Yeah.
So if your need is out there, the Lord will supply. So
Yeah.
Domestic is a little different. I think it varies for your placement, depending on how much time you spend with your birth parents. And if, since we had met Elijah's birth mom and spent a substantial amount of time with her prior to her delivery, he was a little more expensive because we paid for part of her living expenses, anything to make her life easier, anything to help her be counseled, anything to help walk alongside her and guide her to make sure that she got whatever she needed and was best for her in the long run. But we were also, it is pricey, and I think it really varies with different agencies, and I think sadly it continues to go up in price. But we were also blessed financially at the age that we were, and so we were able to do it. But now if we would do it, we probably wouldn't be able to. It just is the stage of life that we were in, basically. But I would be willing to break it down and help anyone go through questions, find agencies help you at all at any given time, ever.
the main thing is a reputable agency.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
we've had people who, their heart's in it, they ask for more and more money, they're giving more and more money, and they never see a child.
For
So,
sure.
What helped us is the adoption agency rating online. Like I
Yes.
should have brought that site, but I use that a lot. Anytime, because we were looking for children that were waiting overseas, and so I'd see what agency they were with, and then I'd go online and look and see what kind of reputation that agency had before we even inquired. Yeah, so you just take some research.
My husband works in a church, and I teach part-time. So we are not very financially well. I mean, the Lord provides, and we have more than we need. But we are not millionaires, and we had to do a lot of fundraising. But I had a friend who kind of had a very similar situation. I taught with her, and her husband was also a pastor, and they were going through the adoption process. And she just looked at me one day, and she said, like, don't let finances be the reason that you don't adopt. Like, it's all God's anyway, and if He has called you to this, He will provide for you. And so through our long waiting process, that was something Brennan and I looked back on a lot. When we had a fall through or when things weren't going well, we did a lot of fundraising, and we ended up with a lot of grant money and tens of thousands of dollars that we were able to raise or we got grants for. And when we had one of those hard moments, that was God's example of faithfulness to us, something that we looked back on and we say, you provided here, and we know that this is your plan and you will provide in the future. So somebody my friend also said to me, it was almost for us like that pregnancy, like going through those hard stages and getting through, like when you're 9 months pregnant and your feet are swollen and it is hard and painful and uncomfortable. Sometimes you have to go through that before you get to the end, and fundraising can certainly feel like that. But it's all God's money, and He will provide. And I do want to kind of piggyback on that point that you guys said about reputable agencies. If you're trying to cut costs in adoption, there's something that's getting cut. So either like services aren't being properly provided to birth moms, and they're not really being explained, they're not being supported before or after, and that's really, really sad to me. So don't just look for like the cheapest agency. Like, you really need to look for quality agencies that have been around a while, and I would highly recommend, if you're ever interested or if you know anyone that's interested, to make sure that they talk to other people who have adopted through that agency so that you can get some really good, do your due diligence.
And your agency should be willing to give you other adopted parents' information, to like contact them and see how the process went for them, and really, so you can see, it's like references.
Yeah.
You would do it if you were getting a babysitter or something, or a job. And so, but also financially, I think people don't really know this, but a lot of companies will pay for, so much money of an adoption. His company paid for a few thousand of it, and it was just looking into it, and it was literally money that helped, and so things like that are important to know, that businesses will pay for, part of your adoption, and people are not aware also of it being a tax write-off, and so you just be aware of everything. Don't ever not do it because of the money, for sure.
Does anybody have any we've got some other prepared questions, but I'd really love to hear if anybody has anything that they're really curious about, or we can keep going if you guys have any. Yeah.
I'm kind of curious what the route is for fostering. I mean, is there a quick way to ask that question, or something like that?
Yeah, kind of like, what are the steps?
Yeah, how do you become a foster parent?
Yeah, so like I said, we were both involved in the social work, and we worked with several foster care agencies around town throughout our careers, and we knew of different foster agencies, so we just contacted them, just called them up, we're looking into this, and kind of just asked that question, what are the steps, what does this look like, and we had some friends, some old coworkers who worked at a foster care agency, and we knew that they were a good foster care agency. I don't know if that.
Yeah, it was a good agency, and the other thing with foster care is you can choose to go through an agency or just go through
just the state.
Just the county.
It's
DCS.
Yeah, just through DCS.
DCS.
Yeah.
With an agency, there's a little bit more support. Like our agency, they do different things for their foster parents. They have a dad's thing that they do once a month, and a mom's thing that they do every so often, and then they meet once a month,
all the families together
for a group.
So yeah, it was important to us to have that extra support. We knew it was going to be challenging. We knew it was something different. Neither one of our families have any experience with adoption, foster care, anything like that. So it's not something that we could rely on them for. We could ask them, what about this? What about that? Like, what does this look like? So we knew we were going to need that extra support, and just from our experience, we knew going straight through the state wasn't going to work for our family, because we needed that extra support. We needed someone who's been there before, and other connections and things like that to support us and keep it.
Yeah, it's good and bad. It's good that you have that extra support. It was overwhelming at times because we had so many people coming to our house almost every day. We just had people come in.
Yeah. Just to check on how are things going. What services do you need? Do you need someone to help with tutoring? Can we help with transportation? How are things? Do you need some more information on what these behaviors are that they're having, and how do you handle that? And so just really trying to be like supportive, but like you said, at times it was every day. Like it seemed like someone was eating dinner or at our dinner table while we were eating dinner, you know, a case manager or a therapist or something. Yeah. So yeah.
Like-
So to go into the process, we kind of got off track.
But I feel like that's the same.
Yeah.
Like just like with an adoption agency, similar with a foster care agency, you're really going to want to look into each one and get referrals
Yes.
from people and all that. The first place that I always recommend people go for foster care or adoption, and actually the Ellers sent me there, is called Loving Shepherd Ministries, and I think they're out of Goshen or Bluffton. They're out of Bluffton, and it's everything I did with them was online, and it's a nonprofit. They don't charge you anything, and they just kind of tell you what your options are. So, like, I filled out a questionnaire about our family, how old our kids were, you know, that kind of stuff, how much money we make, and they told me what countries we were eligible to adopt from. And then they also have like a sheet of like, here are the steps that you have to take, and then they also have a listing on there too of agencies that are more reputable that they've heard of. So if you're interested at all, that's a good place to go. And there's a handout in the back about like steps for international adoption, steps for domestic adoption, and steps for foster care. So they're a great resource, and it's free. It's totally free. And they don't hound you like at all. They give you the information and then they let you do what you want with it. They really just want people to be informed, which is a fabulous resource. So I think, did someone over here have a question?
I was always just wondering, when you adopt internationally, are these kids that are orphans, are they kids that their parents may have willingly surrendered, or do you know, how much do you know about their background, their life, or where they came from?
It's, every situation is different, and it depends also which country. So Haiti is just so poor. So my little Dietrich was skin and bones when we first met him, and his mom, she just couldn't feed him. So she gave up her daughter too. And we were blessed to have met the adoptive mom, and we can still keep or the birth mom, and keep in touch with her, pray for her all the time. So yeah, I think it's different everywhere. You know, when there's natural disasters, the Haiti earthquake and different things like that, they're going to lose parents. But a lot of things there, specifically in Haiti, was they can't feed them. Mm-hmm. So, and in Haiti, like, there's no free school system or anything, and yeah, so it's hard. You just want to like bring them all here. At least we can get you school. But I'm like, I can only handle 4. What if she has one? Oh God, she has another baby.
Well, Leslie, do you want to share about your international?
Ours was specific to Elena because she was born and then went straight to the hospital and was surrendered at birth, and so she has some medical stuff, and so we have a very in-depth medical, and Serbia did a pretty good job of trying to take care of her medical needs and things like that. So we have what led up prior to her birth, her medical doctor's appointments, all those kind of things, and so they did a good job for her. But you know, whenever I was praying, whenever we were looking to adopt, my heart, we were looking in Bulgaria first, and a lot of those children were children whose parents just couldn't afford to take care of them. A lot of them were Roma babies, you know, kind of the gypsy, just they couldn't be taken care of, so they were given to the orphanage. And I didn't want to take a baby from a parent that I knew if I just gave them all the money I raised, then they would be able to take care of their kids. And so my heart was really to adopt an orphan. For me, it was harder for me to want to adopt a child who was just given up because of this lack of money in some ways or things like that. But I know that, you know, all circumstances are different. But yeah, all of the world is different.
Mark, do you want to add anything?
All our adoptions were from Ethiopia. Ethiopia was just decimated by AIDS 10 to 20 years ago. So that created, all Africa was, but that just created so many orphans.
Yeah. And again, I would say find a reputable agency. I have heard some unfortunate horror stories I have a friend that adopted from Congo, and they had a really reputable agency, and they had death certificates for parents, and their son was an orphan. They went through the process at the same time with another family, and some of those things were forged, and they ended up finding people later, and they didn't know that whole story. So find a reputable agency that really does their due diligence. That's why sometimes the more expensive agency is a little better. So there's all kinds of, there's loss and trauma that comes with adoption, and so it's not something that you want to walk into with your eyes closed. You want to be really aware of what's going on and make sure you really do your homework.
And be aware that it's going to be a journey forever.
Uh-huh.
You know, just because we adopted from birth doesn't mean that things aren't going to arise in our life. I mean, just knowing that it's going to be up and down, and that's okay, and they're going to need answers, and you're going to have them. And, you know, right now we don't have what the future looks like, but we know we're willing to do whatever's best for our kids, and whatever God places on their hearts is important. Just knowing that it is important, their story, and what matters to them in the future. And just knowing that it is a challenge, and to seek counseling through it. Even now, you know, as parents, things are going to arise in teenage years, questions are going to come up, and it's going to be really important to be honest about it and to get to the heart of the matter, and even if it's ugly. And it's okay if it is. But I think that's really important, that it's not, oh, we adopted these boys from babies and, you know, they watched everything be so beautiful. It's not going to be like that. We're aware that we have hard years coming, you know, and just knowing that and setting yourself up for it, for sure.
What would you say that not everybody's called to be a foster parent, not everybody's called to be an adoptive parent. What would you say for someone who's like, that's great, I don't think that's for me, how can I support a foster family or an adoptive family? How do you think the church or individuals could help support people?
Well, you know, I mean, there are lots of, like, they did fundraisers, so there's lots of families that need help with that. And just going to fundraisers, being open, listening to their story, I think that's really important. Not everyone does have the money laying around, and, you know, it is important to be just caring and giving about that. And, I mean, I would definitely say probably that. And with foster families, I would think just clothes, anything you have extra. I'm sure I've got an entire basement of totes of clothes that I've saved for every single month and year of all my kids' people, you know? And so that right there, helping with foster parents. Some of these kids I know come with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I guess kind of our situation, he came with some things. But we found out, I guess through experience, I think those items were trauma triggers for him. Mm-hmm. When he put on that sweater or that sweatshirt or something, you know, that he had brought with him, we had behaviors, we had issues, we had, you know, those items became trauma triggers. So in replacing his wardrobe and those things, we saw less behaviors. But when one of those items would come out, or you know, or be one, or we saw some of those behaviors, which was kind of different. I know some places, you know, they want you to keep some of those things because that's their identity. That's their things, you know, that have come with them, and we understand that as well. We did never get rid of those clothes. They ended up in a tote in the basement downstairs. But so just having to switch out wardrobe if it becomes like, you know, trauma triggers for them.
We had to switch out all his clothes, and then it's sad when he came, because he just came with boxes of items. Some of them were just junk that we just had to get rid of. Some of the clothes were just torn and didn't fit anymore, so we had to get rid of some of that stuff. But yeah, clothes were expensive too. As soon as he came, we had to go shopping, and I can't remember how much we spent, but
a lot.
But as far as supporting, like just the support, understanding, like our friends, or none of our friends do foster care or adoption or anything like that. So like going to a friend's house for dinner or thing, that became issues because, well, now why do you have this 9-year-old child that's acting like crazy, and they're tearing up my house, or so you kind of end up isolating yourself. You try to control it, like in your house. Obviously, we signed up for this. We signed up for the hard times and the behaviors and things like that. But just having that support, and even if it's coming to our house, like, like come to our house where we're fine with it, like he has a safe room, or, things like that. But just having that support, having those connections, and just people to talk to, is really helpful.
I know there is a foster parent clothing bank in Fort Wayne, so if that's something that you would like to donate to.
We're part of that.
Yes. Yeah, so if you have clothes, that your kids aren't using anymore or whatever, and that's a small way that you can help care for foster.
Toys, blankets, all of those.
And suitcases. I know they take suitcases too, because sometimes they just come with their stuff in a trash bag. So it helps give them a little bit more dignity. So those are ways that you can get involved that are a little bit different than bringing a child into your own house. One thing I'll say too, my brother is a foster parent, and he also has biological kids. And when his biological kids were born, people signed up and brought him meals, which was fabulous. Yeah. When the 2 extra kids joined their family, they felt very isolated. Nobody brought them meals. Nobody kind of supported them in that way. And so I know when we brought Levi home, people brought us meals, and because he was a newborn, I think people tend to think that way, but they don't always with older kids. And that can be a huge way that you can just say, like, we see you, and let me take care of dinner tonight, even if it's just ordering a pizza or whatever. Sometimes one less thing while you're trying to build that attachment can be really huge for adoptive or foster parents. Rochelle, did you have a question? Yeah.
I believe birth order is important, but sometimes adopting changes birth order. So can you speak, for those of you that is applicable to the impact that birth order has on adopted or biological children?
For
I'm my own, and I'm in my 30s, and how does that work?
Yeah,
for
go
us,
ahead.
that was big. We have a typical firstborn boy. Everything, his siblings bug him. He has everything in perfect order. We knew they had to be younger. We couldn't take away his birth order. For my little girl, so she was the youngest daddy's girl. It's just her and daddy at home. Adoption was really hard because it took away her youngest, because Dietrich was our youngest, and then it took away being the only boy, or only girl, I'm sorry. So adoption was hugely hard for her. So, but we also knew this was what God called us to. So we were aware of that. We did special daddy, daughter dates. We did different things to help work through that. But we also knew and she was also almost like daddy's little princess, almost to the point where I'd be like, oh, gosh. So to me, I thought, okay, this is good. Kirsten's like, are you jealous of my daughter? Maybe. Like, I want to cuddle you.
Well, and if you had more biological children, that would have changed her birth order, too.
Right, because that happens anyway. That's what we kind of thought. But for us, the oldest needed to stay.
Yeah, I think that our oldest 2 are adopted, but we would never change their birth order, no matter what. We know that. Like, it matters too much to them, and that's too important. So as parents, you get the feel for what's best, for sure. You just know. You really do.
That is actually one of the areas we came in blind to. We were, I don't know a better word than ignorant. And we were just like, oh, the cupcakes and rainbows, like they'll be best friends and it'll be wonderful. So our foster son that we brought in was actually 6 months older than our oldest. And yes, it definitely caused issues. That's something we'll be aware of, like moving forward. But yeah, so.
The idea was they'll share a room, they'll be best friends.
It was
Perfect. It was
Yeah.
it'll be perfect.
being
But-
social workers. We should have known better, but
Total opposite.
yeah, it didn't work that way. And with the trauma that these kiddos come from, yes, his chronological age was 6 months older than our oldest, but his mental age and mental capacity was more that of like 4 or 5 years old, which was really difficult for our 10-year-old. It was really hard for him to understand that. Why is he in a grade above me, you know, like above what I am, and he can't even spell? Like he doesn't know his times tables, and he's, you know, in a grade above me, and so it was really difficult for him to understand like the chronological age and like mental age and even like social skills and things, you know, was probably more like about 2 or 3 years old. So it was really difficult for him in understanding the variation in that, because he was 10. Like, why was he not acting like a 10-year-old? Like, so that was really hard for him to kind of to get and understand too.
Yeah, we have a 3.5-year-old biological child as well, and our foster child was playing. He connected more with the 3.5-year-old than he did with the 10-year-old. So that was just really confusing for Isaac, our biological.
Our oldest, yeah.
It was so confusing, so confusing. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Walmsley, do you want to talk it off? Because you interrupted birth order.
Figuring it out. Elena is about 8 months older than Alexander. Yeah, 5-year-old. So the way we played on that is Xander is still bigger than her, though. So we still call him Big Brother, you know. But it's clearly very important to Alexander, our 5-year-old, that he's the big brother, and so you can tell that it is something to be concerned about. Yeah, it's something that affects him. He likes to know that he's still a big brother, even though she just turned 6 and he still has another 7 months until he turns 6. And so,
And she is at, so we've got 6, 5, 3.5, and almost 2. And then we have a 15 at the top. So, and Elena does play really well with our 3.5-year-old. She plays great with him, so we also have that then change up. There's a lot more butting heads between her and Xander, our 5-year-old, than between her and our 3.5-year-old.
I think too, just knowing that nobody has to be the same. You don't even have to discipline and parent your kids the same, and just knowing that that's okay. Because even our boys, they're only, you know, not even a year apart, but they're on complete different spectrums on every aspect of life. And the youngest actually gets that. I feel like we don't give kids enough, I don't know how to say it. We just don't give them enough credit for understanding that. I mean, literally just sitting down with your kid and saying, we understand that it doesn't look okay, that he's getting away with this, but this is why. This is why we're going through these steps of parenting and disciplining him this way versus you. I mean, he got it because we were just honest and talked about it with him and treated him like he deserved, actually. And so I think that really helps too, even with birth order and things like that, that, you know, he is the oldest, but I might treat him more like your 6-year-old sister. And that's okay. You know, but you are 11 and you have these rules to abide by. And so it's just knowing that it's not always going to look the same. And other people outside of your family might not understand that, and that's okay too. You know, we've burned bridges and we've lost families, and that's okay too. And just knowing that the people that really matter to you and your family will stick through the ugliness. Because, you know, I mean, we're all going to go through it for sure. Even if you just had 2 biological children, it's still going to get ugly in life.
Yeah. Any closing questions? We're kind of running out of time, so yeah.
I want to hear from everybody, especially the moms, in all your different situations. How would you kind of summarize counting the cost as far as physical intensity versus emotional versus mental? I don't know, just.
Oh, adoption is so much more emotional than I could have ever prepared myself for.
Yeah.
And it will be forever. I think, you know. It will always affect me. Like, it will always be like just this yearning on my heart forever that they feel loved and feel chosen. And so I know for sure, biological, everything has, I don't know, the emotional, it will outweigh any cost for sure. Even in the best of circumstances, I think you'll always think of that. You'll always think of, am I doing enough? Have they been really fulfilled by living with us?
If I could interject, we've been doing this for 25 years.
Yes.
So I would say to that, they know. They know. And there are ways you know that they know, and you know. And when we did our ugly, we were only 16 years in, and he already knew. And you know, every child's question is, am I loved? And I don't care if they're biological or you give birth to them. Am I loved, and can I do what I want? The answer is yes and no.
In that order.
And it doesn't matter if they come into your life when they're 10, or if they come into your life when they're brand new, fresh, spanking, they smell awful. You know, like, well, they smell awful when they're 10 too. So I think if you're confident of those two, your answer to those two questions, because those are the questions you're asking God. Am I loved? And can I do whatever I want? Right?
Yeah.
And you know how you answer those questions. And if you have confidence of how you answer those questions, then the cost doesn't matter. I'm in. Right?
Yeah.
And I think a friend yesterday asked me to write something for her blog, and I was like, it's a little bit like being an adoptive parent. It's a little bit like waiting for an organ transplant. Because we just never quite weigh the cost of the person that gave us the lung. And so I think, if anything, if today could do anything, I think it would be, there are people who, you know, it like cost them their life for me to have vision. Literally, it cost her life. It took 24 years for her to die, but she did die. And that for me is like, man, I'm in charge of her heart. That's the problem. Yeah, so anyway, I'm an old lady doing it, but
Yeah.
he still lives in my basement, so I still get to say
Yeah. And I would say, there absolutely is a cost, but so is following Christ. There's a cost, and it's hard, and it's painful, and you have to be aware of it. You want to come in with your eyes wide open, but I mean, I think it costs more to not obey what Jesus asked us to do.
Wow.
That was my thing, is if we're not going to adopt it, our journey has been very hard, our time in the country was very hard, to the point where we're like, I don't know if we're going to come home with a little girl because this is so hard. But I said, if this is not what God is calling us to, he's going to call us to something equally powerful, because he calls us to die to ourselves. And so, you know, if I'm not going to die here, he's going to ask me to die somewhere, so I can't run from it.
Yeah. I think you had one more, and then we'll probably close. Yeah.
Me, myself, I was in foster care myself, so I know kind of what that's about.
Yeah.
Also, my children were adopted.
Yeah.
And I can't have no more children, but, you know, if it's God's will for us to be able to get a child, you know, I'm not the best person, I haven't had the best record, and I know a lot of that comes up when you are going through adoption. Like, what was your background? How was you? And then if they look at it as if maybe, well, you didn't raise your own, you know, they would hold that against you. And it's like, the more I sit and think about it, the more I pray about it, it's like, if it's in God's will, regardless of my record, what it looks like, God's going to allow that child to be mine. So, I want a child, it's just, I'm leaving it up to God.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're all God's. Biological, adopted, foster. I mean, we can think there are children, but but really, God's the one that made them. So they're all His anyway. So I just want to say thank you guys for listening. Thanks for being a part of Orphan Sunday. We've got a few things in the back if you want to check out. There's some handouts. If you're interested in more, or you are a foster adoptive parent or an adoptee yourself, we've got a group that meets once a month. And we've got some things going on. We just like to know who you are. So if you want to sign up and just give us your email, that'd be great. There's also a prayer guide in the back from Lifesong for orphans that they did. And it's just 15 days of ways that you can pray for foster families, adoptive families, and orphans. So I would strongly encourage you to take one of those with you and just, that's an easy way that we can
Everybody can get involved.
Yeah, everybody can get involved in different ways, whether that's donating clothes, bringing a meal, praying. God calls us to care for the orphan. Anybody else have anything before we go?
I think besides everything else, besides all the stress and everything that comes with it, I know with our little guy, he brought so much to us too. It's not just what we did for him. He brought so much to us, and sometimes we forget to think about that. So it's a huge blessing for your family to do that. Think about that.
Can we give my panel a round of applause for just volunteering today? We really appreciate you. And thanks so much, guys. Anything you want to close with, Clinton? Or?
No, thank you for coming.